Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining today for this special lunch and learn in honor of ShabbatUK. Such a pleasure for me to be giving this lunch and learn and to be sharing some insights into lighting the Shabbat candles. We've been waiting for ShabbatUK for a long time, and it's a special opportunity for all the communities to come together after we've all been apart for a very long time. ShabbatUK has this extraordinary transformative aspect as we all encourage each other to develop our Shabbat observance. And this year, actually, we celebrate it on Parsha Emor, and it's appropriate because this is a Sedra that opens with the important concept of education and how important educating is. And I want to try and help today to educate somewhat and help to give a deeper understanding of one of the most important aspects of Shabbat, which is the Shabbat candles. And we know that the Shabbat candles is the deciding factor of what the receiving Shabbat is all about. The moment that we say that bracha and see those candles, that's when Shabbat is accepted upon us. I want to start with this beautiful story, which explains the power of the Shabbat candles. So on January the 1st, 2000, the New York Times ran a Millennium Edition, and it was a special issue that featured 3 front pages. One had the news from January the 1st, 1900. The second was the actual news of the day, January the 1st, 2000. And the third was a front page projecting future events for the date of January the 1st, 2100. And the fictional page included things like welcome to the 51st state, Cuba, as well as a discussion about whether robots could vote. And then there was one more thing that down on the bottom of the page was the Shabbat candle lighting time in New York for January the 1st, 2100. And it was just put in by the Times. And the production manager of the New York Times, who was an Irish Catholic, was asked about it. And his answer was really right on the mark. And he said it speaks to the eternity of our people and to the power of Jewish ritual. We don't know what will happen, he said, in the year 2100. It's impossible to predict the future. But one thing you can be certain is that in the year 2100, Jewish women will still be lighting Shabbat candles. So I want to try and talk more about this and give some background to it, and also to give some practical halachot, practical laws that hopefully will help some of you in your observance of this mitzvah. So the Rambam talks a lot about this mitzvah, and he brings 3 different ideas. He says, number 1, the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles is not voluntary, it's obligatory. And he goes into quite a bit of detail about the fact that it's not voluntary. He says, it's not like a mitzvah like Erev, where you can make an Erev if you want to, but you don't have to carry on Shabbat. If you want to carry, then it's a mitzvah to make an Erev. But if you're not interested in carrying, then you don't have to make an Erev. If you want to eat bread, then you have to wash. But if you don't want to eat bread, then there's no obligation to wash. But here, he makes it very clear that Shabbat candles is obligatory. The second thing he talks about is that if a person doesn't have money, they can't afford to buy Shabbat candles, then they need to collect in order to perform this mitzvah, because it's considered oneg Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat means delighting in the pleasures, physical pleasures of Shabbat. And the third thing he says is before you light, you have to make a bracha, which is lehadlik ner shel Shabbat, just like other things that are obligatory according to the rabbis, the Rabbanan. So there's a few things that come about as a result of what the Rambam is saying, a few questions that seem to jut out. And the first is that we don't actually say a bracha for other forms of oneg Shabbat. So things like taking a nap and eating nice foods and relaxing, we don't make a bracha on having a nap. We don't make a specific Oneg Shabbat bracha on having a big bowl of chillent. We do, if we do have a blessing for hamotzi for the rest of the meal, but not specifically for Oneg Shabbat. And just before we take our nap, we don't say a blessing. So what's specific about lighting the candles that's so important and that necessitates us to have this blessing? And why does the Rambam feel he needs to talk about it in such a lengthy way, about the fact that it's obligatory and not voluntary? What's unique about this form of Oneg Shabbat? And why do we not collect money for, let's say we didn't have enough money for the Su'udah on Shabbat? Why are we only collecting for candles? So there's a beautiful and very mystical and deep idea put forward by the Rambam, and also Rabbi Nachman of Breslov points out some of these ideas, that there's something special about the Shabbat candles and what they represent, that they actually in their entirety represent the oneness of God and the physical manifestation of the clarity of God. So on the first day of creation, God says, Vayehi Ar. And he wasn't talking about the physical light from the sun. That was created on day 4. This light of this Ar, this Vayehi Ar, was spiritual clarity that was present on the first day of creation. And on the first Shabbat, Adam and Eve were able to see this physical clarity, spiritual clarity of God. So it actually says that they were able to see from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe that God was one. There were valleys in the way, there were mountains in the way, there were seas, there were animals, there was lots of obstacles, but yet they were able to see God was clear to them on that Shabbat. But unfortunately, when they sinned, that spiritual clarity of oneness and of unity and of peace, understanding that God was, everything that God did was for the ultimate purpose, for good, that was taken away from them. And every time we light the Shabbat candles, that's a manifestation of the whole idea, the whole concept of what that Shabbat was about understanding God's oneness and peacefulness. That we're able to have peace and clarity and understanding that, yes, there are sometimes obstacles, and yes, there are difficulties, but ultimately we understand that God is one. And we need to try and emulate that same feeling in our own homes. And that's why the candles are often spoken about as Shalom Bayit. Shalom Bayit is harmony in the home, and the candles represent Shalom Bayit. Why does it represent harmony? So Rashi explains that just for a practical reason, that when the candles are lit for Shabbat, in olden days they didn't have electricity, and you wouldn't bump into things and there wouldn't be obstacles in the way because you could see. And that would, if you did bump into things, it would cause anger and annoyance, so there would be more fighting. So for practical reasons, the Shabbat candles would help harmony in the home. But the Rambam says, no, it's much deeper. He says that when we're able to be at peace and at one with ourselves and our spouses and our friends, despite seeing that there are differences between all of us, despite the mountains and the valleys between us, that's emulating that original light, that hidden light that is now hidden from us. And that's what Shabbat's all about. Finding peace in all the differences, despite there being obstacles in the way. And this is why it's so important that when we light the candles, we allow it to radiate over us, this spirituality that enters into our soul. And that's why it's more unique than any other type of Oneg Shabbat. Because when you nap, and that leads you, it's a means to an end. That nap leads you to a feeling of being relaxed and enjoying yourself. Here, The actual lighting of the candles is an end in itself, that you are part of this clarity. This is the Shabbat in itself, that understanding and that clarity of that and that oneness. And that's why we need to allow the candle lights to radiate over us, to allow us to reconnect with that hidden light representing oneness and being at peace with each other. And it's said about the prophets that they had this character trait, that whether someone treated them badly or well, they were able to remain in a state of equilibrium, and they were able to feel the same way about both people. And this is the ultimate form of union, of Shalom Bayit, which the Shabbat candles are supposed to recreate and to permeate through us. That we can feel that when God is harsh with us, and that when God is kind with us, we still feel that he's the ultimate, that we appreciate what he's doing for us, that we see that light, that clarity, that ultimately it's all good. Okay, and now I would like to, we've seen a little bit of the background of the mitzvah and understanding some of the deeper mystical insights into it. Now I want to look at some practical halachot, practical laws about candle lighting. So one other aspect that we didn't discuss was kavod Shabbat. The ultimate honor of Shabbat, giving dignity to the Shabbat, is when we are appreciating that God is one. And by saying that blessing and doing this mitzvah, this, as well as being Oneg Shabbat, and different to the other types of Oneg Shabbat, this is also giving dignity to the Shabbat, that we're equating it to that original light. And when should you light? So the other aspect, another practical aspect is about the best time to light. The most common time is 15 or 18 minutes before sunset, and that will often be written on your calendars as the Hadlakat Neirot time for candle lighting should be then. But you can light up until sunset. And the earliest time is Plug HaMincha, which is 1.25 halachic hours before sunset. So halachic hours are different to regular hours. Basically, daylight hours are divided into 12, and each one is a halachic hour. So it depends how long the day is, daylight hours are, as to how long a halachic hour will be. The latest time to light is sunset. After sunset, you can't light anymore. But if a husband sees that a wife is running late, he should light the candles himself to avoid her wanting to light post shkia, post sunset. A non-Jewish person, if chas v'shalom you running really late and you don't manage to do it in time, you can ask a non-Jewish person from the time of sunset up until time of the time of night, because that time is a doubtful time, whether it's the next day or the previous day. And if it is considered the next day, then you're not allowed to do it yourself, in which case you can ask someone not Jewish to do it for you. But you shouldn't say a blessing on that. And it's not ideal. Okay, accepting Shabbat. So when do we actually accept the Shabbat upon ourselves? So the women accept it at candle lighting, and the men accept it at the end of Lecha Dodi and Mizmar Shirliyim HaShabbat, when they say Kabbalat Shabbat in shul or at home. But there are special circumstances where a woman may delay the acceptance of Shabbat. So let's say she lights the candles, but she stipulates either verbally or mentally that she needs to still do some form of malacha, some form of work after she's lit the candles. She can do that for an important reason up until sunset. So she lights the candles, but then she needs to go somewhere really important. If she had in mind that she wasn't accepting it until sunset, she can do that. Okay. In terms of the procedure, it's nice and it's preferable that she's dressed in nice clothing, ready for Shabbat, because that honors, it lends dignity to the mitzvah. It's also nice if she or he spends time in tefillah, davening, and for her children, and especially there's a special inyan, special idea to daven that your sons should become Talmidei Chachamim, that your children should become Talmidei Chachamim. And also many people give charity at this point. They keep a special tzedakah box nearby. There's a special reason why we actually have to cover our eyes when we say the bracha, because normally when a person does a mitzvah, they will say the blessing first and then do the mitzvah. But here, we can't do that, because if we say the blessing, then we've accepted Shabbat, and then we can't light candles because Shabbat's in. So here we have to do it the other way. We light the candles and then say the blessing. So when we place our hands over our eyes, it's in order to say that even though we've lit the candles, the actual benefiting of the light we haven't quite done yet. So we're covering our eyes, so we're not getting benefit until after the blessing. And then as soon as we take our hands away from our eyes and we see the light, and that is when we have brought Shabbat in. Okay. Candles, they should preferably be burning throughout the meal, or at least until the beginning of the meal. You're supposed to be able to get benefit from the light to be able to see your meal. And it makes sense, because that enhances the culinary experience of eating when you can actually see what you're eating and how it looks. And that makes a lot of sense. It's more enjoyable to see what you're eating. Okay, in terms of the number of candles, the actual obligation is to have only one candle, but it's become the accepted custom to have 2 candles, and that's because it represents the 2 aspects of Shabbat, Shamar and Zachar, guarding of Shabbat and the remembering of Shabbat, and that is symbolic of the positive commandments associated with the Shabbat and the negative commandments associated with Shabbat. Many people have also accustomed to add a candle for each child. The candle should be on or next to the table of the Shabbat Seudah, or at least in a place where they will give benefit. So, for example, if you can't light in a sukkah because it's dangerous or it's too small, it gets in the way of the rest of the food, as long as it's in another place where you can derive benefit from it, that's fine. But you mustn't move the candles once they are lit. So who is obligated to light? So actually the obligation applies to all adult members of the household. Chazal didn't require each member to light, but rather one member should light on behalf of everyone. And the minhag, the custom became for the woman of the house to light, because she was most associated with running the household in those times. There is a custom for girls to light from the age of 3, and this is mostly a Chabad custom, but that shouldn't replace an adult lighting as well. There are different situations which you might find yourself in. For example, if you're eating out, if a couple is invited out for a Friday night meal, the woman can either light at home and get some benefit from it in her own home before she goes out, or she can light in the host's home. If she's at the home of a friend, if for a whole Shabbos, then she could be covered by their lighting. Or if for a meal, she's only invited for the meal and she's sleeping at home, then she should light in her own home, and it wouldn't be covered by them. If your family is a guest at another household, technically the head of that household the women of that household can fulfill the obligation on behalf of you, and they can light for you. But the custom is that every married woman should light their own candles and recite a bracha. In hospitals, since many hospitals forbid lighting candles, electric lights can be used. Rav Moshe says that you shouldn't say a bracha, but other rabbis have said differently, and you should ask your own specific question about this. If, let's say, a wife is in the hospital and the husband is at home, he should light the candles and she's exempt. He should light them at home and she doesn't need to, although she can light in the hospital if she wishes to, but without a bracha. If you're in a hotel, they often don't let you light in the room or in the dining room. Sometimes they do, but if they're only allowing lighting in the lobby, you need to make sure to wait for a few minutes there to get benefit from the candles, or use an electric light in your room. In the case of camp or yeshiva, one person lights in the dining room for everyone, and that's fine, often. But if more people want to light for themselves, that's also okay. Husbands and wives, if one spouse is away for Shabbat, the spouse remaining at home should light the candles and include the other spouse. The absent spouse should still see to it that there is light where he or she is staying. So if they've gone to another household, they should make sure that head of that household is lighting. But if neither spouse is at home and they're not spending Shabbat together, each has their own obligation to light candles. So I'm going to end there, and I just want to say thank you for listening, and I hope that this has helped enhance your Shabbat candle lighting. And if you're one of those people that's always panicking to get to the Shabbat candles in time for Shabbat, try and do it 5 minutes earlier. Take on something extra to beautify the mitzvah. Have extra time to daven. Take on some mitzvah to enhance or beautify it in some way. Maybe make your candles extra beautiful, or use extra beautiful wax or oil, and try something different that you haven't done before to enhance the mitzvah. And I wish you much hatzlacha, and I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And if anyone has any specific questions about anything I've said, I'd be really happy for you to contact me. Please be in touch. Thanks so much for listening, and bye.